lawyers. Today is December the 24th. Now is 12:34 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. If you're here with us, feel free to suggest a topic of your interest for us to discuss here live. If you have specific questions, I'm going to do my best to answer them without going too much into specifics. We are not allowed to provide like a traditional consultation here online, but I'm going to be happy to discuss as much as possible about the topic at hand. And this said, let's take a look at the news. Let's see what's going on in Brazil. And this is the Estadão newspaper. Estadão is the newspaper we've been using. Typically here at the live stream, it's a newspaper with over 150 years of history. It is, if I'm not mistaken, like the second largest newspapers in Brazil. And it is found not only in São Paulo, that's where Estadão is based, but you actually find this newspaper throughout the country, particularly in capitals. Okay, so even if you are, let's say, in the northeast of Brazil, you can typically find the printed version of Estadão. And the main headline goes like this: Moraes, which is like nowadays the main justice of the Brazilian Supreme Court, has called 6 times to the president of the Brazilian Central Bank in a single day to address interests of the bank known as Banco Master, right? Like for those of you who don't know the specifics about this headline, Banco Master is a bank that is being kind of dismantled by the Brazilian Central Bank. He was involved in frauds, like in serious frauds, you know, against retirement, pension funds, and many other parties. And Banco Master was trying to get a deal to sell itself to another bank, right? And you know, the regulators were not allowing this transaction to go through because of the level of frauds. And then the justice, Alexandre de Moraes, was kind of intervening, right? It was kind of lobbying with the, you know, a president of the Brazilian Central Bank to allow this transaction to go through, okay? And the problem here is, the first thing, like a justice shouldn't be lobbying, right? Like for anyone. And to make things worse, Alexandre de Moraes, the justice's wife, she was in a contract with the bank, with Banco Master, based on the news, right? Everything is written here on this page that you see. And she was entitled to 130 million reais contract, right? Like she's an attorney, she has a law firm, so she got a contract with Banco Master for 130 million reais, which would be paid, I think, over the course of 1 year or something like this, right? So this is becoming like, you know, the major topic in Brazil as we speak, particularly because this minister, like he was the one who basically got President Bolsonaro in jail, and he was also the one who was, you know, over the years antagonizing, you know, like particularly big tax from the United States, right? So this is the topic of news nowadays, and that's something you can read here on Estadão. Remember, like, you know, it's in Portuguese. I understand most of you don't read Portuguese fluently, but if you open a Brazilian website using Chrome and you right click, you are able to machine translate the content. And given the, you know, the development stage of AI, nowadays the translation is getting pretty good, right? So a few years ago, it would be a kind of cumbersome type of translation, but not anymore. Nowadays, you can actually get a pretty decent, a functional English translation of the topic. So if you're interested in those topics over here, take a look and get the facts by yourself so you can understand the state of things in Brazil. All right, we have here a first participation. We have General Principal. General Principal, boa tarde, Mr. Oliveira. I cannot stay for the whole live stream, but I'm sending a Feliz Natal and Happy Holidays to everyone at Oliveira Lawyers and in the live stream. That's so nice of you, General Principal. I appreciate the participation. And absolutely, I understand that today is going to be a busy day for many people, right? And just sharing something, General Principal, about Brazil. In Brazil, we, like people actually celebrate Christmas on the 24th, right? We all understand that Christmas is on the 25th, but when families are going to gather big time, it's usually, typically, on the 24th, right? Like as the, the evening approaches, that's when everybody is going to start to celebrate Christmas. And, and the 25th, even though, yes, we say Christmas is on the 25th, the 25th for us is more like the aftermath, right? Like the after event. So the main event, for Brazilians are typically on the 24th in the evening, okay? So very interesting. Now, in Brazil, most professional firms, they are gonna be off, actually not only on the 24th, but actually in the whole week of Christmas and New Year's Eve. That's very typical because of employment obligations we have. We need to give everyone 30 days of paid vacation, believe it or not, right? And so we don't disrupt too much work throughout the year. What most companies are going to do, they are going to, have try to have half of the 30 days between Christmas and New Year's Eve. So that's why, in Brazil is super consistent that you're going to try to find, if you try to find a dentist, if you try to find a lawyer, if you try to find an engineer, right? Any type of professional services, very difficult for you to find people around those days. Matt Gaines, thank you so much. I got a Christmas gift from Matt and Adrian. Thank you so much, Matt. Feliz Natal, Dr. Oliveira. Thank you for these wonderful, informative live streams. We all appreciate you. Thank you so much, Matt and Adrian. I'm very happy to have you guys here with me. And let me know, how do you celebrate Christmas, if you will. Let me know what you have in your plans. Thank you so much, Matt and Adrian, again. Marisa Navas, boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Desejamos Feliz Natal. Obrigada pelos seus ensinamentos. Amamos suas lives. Thank you so much, Marisa and Ricardo. They are sending us messages. Actually, they are in Spain. They are typically in Portugal. I see here the flag, but I know they are spending their Christmas in Spain for a break, right? For those of you who are not experienced in Portugal, let's say that Portugal is a very small country in geographical terms, right? Like, so if you are in Lisbon, for instance, you can get to Spain in less than a couple of hours, okay? So yes, I mean, people typically go to Spain just for a break, right? Like, I mean, it is a substantially different language. Portuguese and Spanish, they do have some similarities, but I guarantee they are different enough for people not to be able to communicate unless they have, a very reasonable experience in each other's language, right? So, very common for U.S. citizens and other foreign citizens, for the matter, to come to Brazil, and they are going to speak Spanish, and they're going to expect people to understand. And you know what? Like, many times it's going to be better than nothing, right? But yes, like, I mean, in Brazil, I'm sure everyone here at the live stream knows that we don't speak Spanish. Another interesting factor is that Brazilians, they don't see themselves as Hispanics. Okay, so particularly in the United States, U.S. citizens tend to kind of have Brazilians and Hispanics in the same group, like mentally, right? Like for them, it's the same thing, right? Like they say, well, it's just a minor nuance, but everyone is Hispanic, and that's actually for some Brazilians like even offensive because they don't see themselves as Hispanic. And my take is like, yes, I mean, from a more accurate perspective, we are not Hispanic. Like, I mean, Portugal and Spain are clearly two distinct nations with two separate languages and substantially different cultures as well. So it would be similar to say, listen, an Irish and a U.S. citizen are basically the same, right? Like, I mean, I guess you could expect both Americans and Irish people to become offended by that commingling, right? So kind of the same thing with Brazilians. Whenever you address Brazilians as Hispanics, they are going to typically get offended. All right, not everyone, but that's what I see most of the time. All right, let's see what else we have. Let's just share real quick here an ad from Remax Nomad States in Rio de Janeiro. They have big plans for 2026, a lot of new developments in Rio de Janeiro, and they have a new methodology to kind of, filter out developments that are not suitable for foreign citizens. They are also doing something similar in Fortaleza, right? So if you, for instance, don't have the funds to buy a property right now, pre-construction or off-plan properties in Brazil are typically a way to allow people, to kind of save/invest in a property over time without, having to disburse all the price in a single shot. There you go. You can take a look at the information. You can take a screenshot and contact them as needed. All right, let's see what else we have here in our backlog. Again, if you're here with us, remember, you have a priority in terms of suggesting topics of your interest, and it could be any topic. Remember, we are not here to just discuss legal stuff. I understand as a law firm, people are going to immediately think about legal topics, but we are here to discuss like Brazil, we are here to discuss like Portugal. So if you have any questions at all, or any topics of interest, just let us know, and we're going to do our best to discuss these topics over here. Okay, so taking a look at the backlog, right? And I'm not going to read out all the emails. I'm kind of, I will try to summarize what these emails are about, and then, briefly discuss the topics being asked. Okay, one of them is about the political climate between Brazil and the United States. And there is some level of antagonism between Brazil under the President Lula, clearly a left-oriented politician, and nowadays United States from President Trump, a clearly right-wing politician, right? So not surprisingly, there is a rocky relationship between those two countries. And just to show the distinction, nowadays we have a right-wing president, Milei, in Argentina, a neighbor country from Brazil. and the relationship between Argentina and the United States is going great, right? Because they are clearly aligned, right? And by the way, Argentina is also antagonizing Brazil every time they have a chance, again, because of the mismatch between their political orientations, okay? But now going back to Brazil and the United States, I think, Brazil and the U.S., they have a lot of dependency in terms of, economy, in terms of productive sectors. It is just impossible for those two countries to have a full break in terms of relationships, right? So we know that President Trump had applied tariffs against Brazil, like a very steep tariffs, but those tariffs they were mostly removed over time. There was also the act by the United States to qualify Minister Alexandre de Moraes, the same one that is now being investigated for lobbying in favor of a bank. There was the Magnitsky law, which would preclude this minister from using services from U.S. companies, which is a pretty big deal for anyone, right? Because even in Brazil and naturally in other countries, MasterCard and Visa, they are major networks for credit card and debit card payments. So if you are not allowed to use those networks, guess what? You're kind of doomed in terms of financial services, in terms of flying internationally. It becomes a really difficult thing to do. And Minister Alexandre de Moraes was under the Magnitsky law, but recently, the United States removed minister and his wife from the Magnitsky, status. And so this shows that nowadays it looks like most of the aggravation between the United States and Brazil, it's gone. And I'm going to tell you, for as long as we have President Lula in our presidency and President Trump in the U.S. presidency, there is going to be some level of friction. Okay, again, very difficult political and takes, and that's just natural. But I think the worst is behind of us, and I have great hopes for these two countries in 2026. All right, so that's my take. I don't think we're gonna be, seeing a much more aggravation. Of course, there is the matter of Venezuela. The United States is pushing and pushing, for Maduro, like the current. I don't know if I say the president or dictator of Venezuela, right? Because across the board, nobody recognizes that Maduro won the election, right? Like it looks like he's basically clinging to power despite not having been elected president of Venezuela. So the United States is pushing really hard. And Brazil, again, under President Lula, is kind of reacting, saying, listen, you know what, like South America, it's our business, not your business. And naturally, the United States is not really paying too much attention to what President Lula thinks from that perspective, right? So there is also this kind of risk for some level of dispute, if you will, between Brazil and the United States. But overall, I think, both countries recognize they are much better off when they collaborate with each other. All right, let's take a look at what else we have. Donna, good to see you, Donna. Feliz Natal para você, sua família e todos que me ajudaram de tantas maneiras. Thank you so much, Donna. Also wishing you, a Merry Christmas to you, your family, your new friends in Brazil. I'm sure you're going to have a blast, Donna. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing your wishes. All right, Jamaska, do you think Brazil will ever get rid of forced airship? Jamaska, all right, that's an interesting question, and let me elaborate a bit for other people here in the live stream. So, Jamaska is talking about forced airship, and the forced airship, it goes like this. In Brazil, you cannot tell, believe it or not, you cannot tell who's going to be receiving your inheritance, right? Like, I mean, at least half, 50% of your assets, they are going to be distributed according to the state law. Okay, so or federal law in that matter, right? Like when I'm saying state, I'm talking about Brazil as a whole. So there is federal law dictating how you're gonna distribute your inheritance, right? Like meaning you don't have a saying, but that's for 50% of your assets. We call it in Portuguese. There is a term for that. We call it the a legítima, or the legitimate part of your assets. That's a weird term. I don't know the root for this term, but a legítima, whenever we talk about a legítima, we're talking about this half that is going to be distributed according to law. Okay, so even if you write a will, you're not going to have the possibility of dictating how the particular half is going to be distributed, and that's exactly exactly what Jamaska is asking over here. Is like, what about this 50% thing that I don't have a saying, right? Now, just remember, like the idea here is not that you're going to be sending your assets to the government, right? You're actually going to leave these assets for your family. So what the law is doing over here is precluding you from giving out 100% your assets according to your wishes. And the situation here that the legislators and our culture and many other cultures, by the way, Jamaska, not only Brazil, right? Like, I mean, if you go to Europe, there is a bunch of countries who are going to follow the forced airship approach. The idea here is that you see is very common. Like you read in the news, like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, about like one of those billionaires, right? Like particularly from the media sector, right? This gentleman is like in his 80s or 90s, and then he's gonna meet a woman in her 30s, and they're gonna fall in love. And then this gentleman, he's going to leave, like, the assets accumulated during a lifetime to this lady, right? Of sometimes, a very short term relationship, right? So this is something kind of common in the United States. I don't think it is representative, of course, of relationships in the US, but it is something that you see consistently in the news. So in Brazil, that would never happen, right? Particularly because after a certain age, guess what? You cannot even enter into a relationship that would grant this other spouse, patrimonial rights, okay, asset rights, right? So in Brazil, we're very protective of family relations. And here the idea, again, is not that you're going to be giving your money out to the government or, I don't know, to your neighbor or to a cousin, right? The idea here is actually the opposite. The idea here is at least half of your assets, the state is going to tell you how it's going to be distributed. And typically it goes like you would expect. Half of your assets should go to your children if you have children. If you don't have children, it should go to your parents. If you don't have a parent, it should go to your siblings, and so on. And again, that's for 50% of your assets. The other half, you can give it to anyone you want. You can give it to the state. You can give it to a neighbor. You can give it to a friend. Or yes, if you are in your 70s, 80s, or 90s, and if you want to give it to a 20-year-old woman, you're free to do so. All right, Jamaska. So yeah, so this is not gonna change for sure. That's very ingrained, not only in our legal system, but it's also very ingrained in our cultural backdrop, if you will. So that's not gonna change, Jamaska. Like for I would say for the next, you know, 100 years or a couple of 100 years, if you will. Jamaska is saying, I grew up in the Caribbean but have lived in the US since 17 years old. Do I need police records from both to apply for residency in Brazil? So, Jamaska, typically, listen, if you've been living in the US for your whole life, that's where the background check is going to be expected from, okay? Now, it also depends on the interpretation of the immigration officer handling your application. So the standard is like for the place of residency. So if you've been residing in the United States, I would say a background check from the US is going to be the standard. Here at the firm, what we do is like we decide which one would be the correct option for you, and then we're gonna try get you approved using that particular background check. And if it doesn't work, listen, we're just gonna let you know. Listen, Jamaska, we tried. They feel like they also should have a background check from Jamaica, and yes, you're gonna need to go and get this thing right. But most of the time, they are gonna be satisfied with this major one, if you will, particularly if you're not been traveling often to Jamaica. Right now, let me show you. Let me give you an example of when a Jamaican background check would be advisable. Let's say if you're traveling, every other month to Jamaica and spending 15 days in the country, I think it would be just natural for the immigration officer to expect a background check from Jamaica, because guess what? Like, you're basically living part-time in Jamaica, right? So I'm just giving you a couple of examples, and as you may imagine, most of the cases, they are going to fall in between. They are not going to be extremes, right? They are going to be somewhere in this kind of horizon. And so for every client or every case, a different recommendation will apply. All right, we have Praveen. Praveen Shamashekar. Have you heard about the Floyd Wallace Jr. arrest in Brazil due to sex trafficking, sex with minors, and child endangerment? How much does your firm charge for representation? Praveen, I did hear about the arrest, and I think it was recently, right? I don't know if it was yesterday or if it was on Monday, and I don't know the specifics, right? Like, I don't know the specifics. It looks like they have a pretty solid evidence that this man was actually like seeking sexual relationships with minors, right? Like, I mean, it looks like they had like pretty solid evidence. So that's as far as I would go. And Praveen, I don't think we are the right match. We typically, like, if you look at our website, you're gonna see that criminal representation, criminal defense is not like in our main lines of service, right? And particularly for this type of crime, I think the gentleman would be better represented by a law firm specializing, right, in such subjects. Okay, but there was something big. It was in the news, right? Like, for whoever is in Brazil, if you've been watching like the news. The news channels, there was something that it was probably difficult to miss if you are in Brazil and if you watch the news every day or every evening, right? Like something very typical of Brazil, something that was such as a staple in my upbringing is like every evening most families, right? Not nowadays. Nowadays you have internet, you have social media, but I would say that probably up to 20 years ago, most families they would have a dinner together, and typically watching news on a TV set by the dining room, right? Or like for Brazilians, we typically don't have a separate dining room. We have like a kitchen table, right? So everybody is going to have dinner in the kitchen, and believe it or not, in the kitchen, typically, right, in this kind of arrangement, there would be a TV set. I don't know nowadays, right? Like nowadays, things are so different, so diverse in terms of family arrangements. But again, up to 20 years ago, it was almost a standard that pretty much everyone would follow. The family, around 7 or 8 p.m., having dinner, watching the news. And more, even more interesting, it would be typically a single TV channel, the Globo, right? Globo TV, which translates as globe. And that was like, or still the dominant Brazilian channel, right? But up to 20 years ago, it was like, I don't know, they would have like 90+% of the audience in terms of news, and everybody was going to be watching the news, right? So that's what we have nowadays. Now, I see that Jamasca's sharing has already drawn curiosity naturally, right? And we have here Donna. Donna is asking, what if I have no family here to receive 50%? That's a good question, Donna. So typically, the judge in charge of adjudicating your probate, right? Because there would be a probate. Let's assume, right? Let's assume you have property in Brazil. Your property in Brazil cannot be decided or handled by the United States. The United States does not have, legal capacity over your property in Brazil. So inevitably, like you're gonna have a Brazilian judge who's gonna decide what's gonna happen to your property, right? And then the judge is going to look at the property, and then the judge is going to look at the heirs, and they are going to make a decision if they are going to follow whatever you have in terms of will, either a will in Brazil or in the United States, and they are also going to decide how the distribution is going to occur. Now, answering your question, right? If you have no family here in Brazil, so the judge, he's not concerned about where your family lives, like he's typically concerned about your family, okay, Donna? So as long as you have a family in the United States, like children, typically he would try to apply Brazilian law, right? So let's say if you have, 2 children, and then you have, a husband who's not the father of your children, and then, the judge would try to apply the law of the forced heirship based on your current, family relationships. So, if you have a husband and this husband, is living with you, potentially he would give 50% of this property to your husband based on the forced heirship, and the remaining 50%, the judge would grant to your children in the United States, right? So there is no border limitation to this kind of arrangement. It is more focused on the family relationships than actually the geographical location of your family members. And again, you could even decide that 50%, let's say you have, I don't know, and listen, I'm not talking about you, I'm just talking in general. Let's say you have like a church, you have a synagogue, and you want to, donate 50% of your property and your assets, to that particular religious entity, right? And you could do so, and Brazil would respect that wish. The other 50%, though, it would be potentially distributed according to the forced heirship rules. Okay? Steve, welcome, Steve. A U.S. attorney told me that getting married in the U.S. on a tourist visa will ruin your chance for U.S. residency. Is this also true for obtaining residency in Brazil? Steve, so typically, right, just like you would expect, immigration in the United States is like, much more, stringent than immigration in Brazil, right? So in Brazil, typically there is no such a problem, okay? Like you could easily come as a tourist to Brazil. And to tell you the truth, like that's what most people do, right? They don't get any special licenses from the United States or any prior immigration, like residency or visas before marrying in Brazil. They would, most of our clients, they would come as just a tourist up to recently under a waiver, and nowadays a U.S. citizen would come with a visa. Nowadays you need the e-visa, and then once you enter Brazil, as long as you have the laundry list of documents required to marry in Brazil, which is typically a pain in the neck, okay? It's not easy to marry in Brazil. We've been discussing about this topic many times here in our live stream. But yes, if you have this laundry list of documents, if you endure all the pain of bureaucracy in Brazil, you're going to marry and you're going to be free to secure permanent residency in Brazil based on marriage, naturally, as long as you meet other requirements such as a reasonable background check. And if you're coming from the United States, this background check is typically an FBI fingerprint-based background check with an apostille from Washington, D.C. All right, but no concerns over there, Stephen, like very different from the United States, okay? Matt Gaines, I have a last will and durable power of attorney. Will does not be accepted once we move to Brazil. I can tell you one thing for sure, Matt, not automatically, all right? So this document has zero value to Brazil until it goes through a court, okay? So the concern here, it's probably not the last will, right? Because if your last will was done in accordance with the laws of the state in which you reside nowadays, Brazil would try to follow the last will as much as possible, right? What is the as much as possible? It means Brazil is going to follow your last will as long as it does not conflict with Brazilian law, right? So remember the forced heirship, right? So the forced heirship would play out over here, particularly if you happen to be married to a Brazilian. If you marry to a Brazilian, I guarantee every judge in Brazil would adjudicate, like a probate through the forced heirship perspective, because guess what? One of the reasons for them to do so, it would be to protect a Brazilian. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. So last will, depending on your family relationships, is not going to be a problem because, again, the court is going to try to follow. The aggravation here is going to be the bureaucracy, right? Like you're going to go through a probate. The judge is not going to know the law from the state in which you were residing when you made the will. So they're going to need proof of law. And this thing, could easily last a long, long time. Okay. Now, the problem here is actually the durable power of attorney, which would have zero value to Brazil, right? Because again, these legal paperwork, they come to Brazil they were not done in Brazil. They were not done in Brazil. They were not done in accordance with Brazilian law. So this document in particular, it has zero value to the Brazilian legal system. Now, particularly for the durable power of attorney, you could have something done in Brazil in accordance with the Brazilian laws, right? So let's say if you are planning for residency in Brazil on a more permanent basis, those are things that naturally you should plan and get resolved early on during your residency. Okay. We have Ahmed. How's it going, Ahmed? Hello, Dr. Oliveira. Wishing you and your team, Paulo, Marina, Camila, a Merry Christmas. Thank you so much, Ahmed. I'm surely gonna share with Paulo, Marina, and Camila. A Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you, Ahmed. May God bless your efforts. Thank you so much. What foods do people typically eat for Christmas in Brazil? All right, Ahmed, that's an interesting question. So there are some dishes that are going to be very typical. In Brazil, people are going to have, turkey, right? Like in the United States, many people, they have a turkey specifically for Thanksgiving. For us Brazilian, actually Christmas time, it has a good connection with turkey. There is a lot of pork. There is a variation of pork that we call tender, which is a large piece of pork. It's almost like ham, right? But it has a different type of cooking. So that's also very typical in Brazil. And it's very common for families, when they are going to get together, they're going to say, listen, each of you are going to bring a different plate. So in addition to those main dishes, then you're going to have, different types of dessert. And then you're going to have, cakes, pies. You're going to have, for some families, the famoso brigadeiro. Brigadeiro is a major Brazilian dessert. I'm going to write over here. Brigadeiro is a very traditional Brazilian dessert. Right, so that's also typical. We have other types of desserts. Naturally, you're going to have, rice. Particularly in my family, they would have a special type of rice. It would be mixed with what we call uva passa. It would be like dry grapes mixed with the rice. In Brazil, very typical. We always have, rice and beans, right? So for larger families, beans, they would be almost always there, right? Like the beans, desserts, turkey, sometimes, I specially prepared chicken, pork, and so on. Also very typical in the Brazilian culture, people are going to have beers, right? Particularly men in their 20s or 30s or 40s, they are going to drink a lot of beer, even during Christmas, right? So you're going to see, like part of the family, hey, slow down, don't drink too much. And those folks, they're going to be drinking, a lot, and sometimes, creating some type of trouble. But it's just like, I guess, part of the, family dynamics in Brazil. And listen, there is also a variation, right? Like, there are many, different religion groups in Brazil, for instance, right? Like we have a large Jewish population in Brazil, which is typically surprising to people. But so naturally, right? Like if you are in a Jewish family, if it is a more conservative or a more traditional Jewish family, first thing, they're not going to be even celebrating Christmas, right? But also surprising many Jewish families in Brazil, or maybe Muslim families for the matter, they are going to still be entangled in a Christmas, because Christmas is so common in Brazil that even if you're not a Christian, chances are either your spouse is going to be a Christian, or I don't know, your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, and guess what? People would not refrain from attending a Christmas party. I hope, just because it's not matching their religion. But naturally, right? Like if you are Jewish or Muslim, then you're not gonna eat pork. But then hopefully, you're gonna be able to enjoy a really nice turkey, some Brazilian dishes, and so on. So this is another a very important factor or distinction that we see in Brazil. In the United States, particularly, you see whole communities who are, kind of segregated by desire many times, right? Like it looks like there is, I think it's in Minnesota, nowadays is becoming, like a major point of contention between, the political sides of the aisle. And it looks like there is, I'm not sure if it is I think it is a Somali community over there, and they grow like apart. They are very closed in terms of relationships, right? So this doesn't happen in Brazil, even if you want to, right? The Brazilian culture is typically encompassing. There is this kind of force to bring people together. So even again, if you're not a Christian in Brazil, typically you're gonna be participating of Christmas to some extension, right? Even if you're not preparing the dishes at home, you're gonna potentially attend a Christmas party, from a brother-in-law or sister-in-law or another relative, if you will. James Rochas, Feliz Natal, amigo. Feliz Natal, James. I am a digital nomad based in Fortaleza. Is there a way to go for a student visa with Portuguese course here? What is the process? Yes, James. That's in line with what I told Steven. Brazilian immigration in general is pretty flexible, right? Brazilian immigration doesn't have most of the safeguards, if you will, that you would see in the United States. So very typical in Brazil for you to change visas, change residencies without too much of a headache. Okay, so if you are currently in Brazil under a digital nomad, you could renew your digital nomad, right? Which is typically easier and less burdensome than going for a student residency. Okay, the student residency would require you first to find a program that is going to be compliant. And once you find a program that's going to be compliant, then you need to file an application. This application, interesting, in most of the country, you would be filed directly with the Brazilian Federal Police. Okay, I do recommend you to secure a proper advisory. It doesn't need to be from us. If it is from us, we're happy to assist you. If you find a local provider in your area, that's fine as well. And I'm saying so because if you go to Polícia Federal, they don't have like neither the obligation nor the capability of advising you on how to apply. And so most of the time they're going to say, well, listen, your problem, you just go out there. Once you file an application, then you come back over here. And typically the application is going to be through an appointment that you're going to schedule with the Brazilian Federal Police. And then once you have all the compliant paperwork, you're going to show up for this appointment. If the paperwork is on point, they could potentially grant you the R&M on the spot. All right, James, let me ask you all for a favor. If you're here with us, don't forget to like our live stream. When you like our live stream, you help with our channel. and you also help other people just like you find this content. All right, so don't forget, just a real quick, click on the like button. If you haven't subscribed already, you are invited to subscribe, and follow us for more content. Exactly, Donna. Donna is reading my mind. 5 likes and 16 watching. Hit the like button. Thank you, Donna. Yes, every one of you, if you could do me a favor, go and click the like button. That's going to be very appreciated. Alright, Wilbert, Senhor Oliveira, muito obrigado pela sua ajuda este ano. Feliz Natal e próspero ano novo. The same to you, Wilbert. And just translating for those of you who are not yet fluent in Portuguese, Wilbert is saying, Mr. Oliveira, thank you very much for your help during this year. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you so much, Wilbert. I really appreciate your presence. And Donna, gonna try my first torta fria. Clueless what it is, but loving trying new things. Torta fria, yes. That's a special type of pie. And Brazilians, they are big in pies, right? Like, not exactly the same pies you would find in the United States. Like we have, salty pies. They are more popular in Brazil than the typical pies, like cherry pie or apple pie, or every pie you can think of in the United States. They are not really typical in Brazil, and we have our own types of pie. So I'm sure Donna is gonna have a blast with this pie called torta fria, and many other dishes. Donna, usually Brazilians like to go all out in terms of getting food. There is no such a thing as preparing enough food for everyone. Like, we're gonna want to prepare food enough that everybody's gonna be happy, and everybody is also gonna be taking home a lot of food. Okay, and typically we're gonna be exchanging food. So if I'm preparing a torta fria pie, I'm gonna prepare a huge one, because this should be enough for people to eat during the celebrations. But not only that, it should be enough for part of the torta fria to be taken home, right? And hopefully by not just one person, but by multiple people, right? So you guys, it should be a pretty big torta fria. Or many families, like, if they're unable to make like a huge pie, then they're gonna make a regular size pie, but then they are gonna make additional dishes. Okay, so I remember, like, from my childhood, my parents, they would typically prepare, I don't know, like 3 to 4 different dishes. Probably like 4. Yeah, it was more like 3 dishes. Large dishes. So 2 dishes we would take to our first celebration spot, and then the second one, they would take just 1 dish, because the second spot was run by my grandmother from my father's side, and she was big into cooking. Like, so she would cook like, I don't know, 10 different dishes. She wouldn't let much room for us to bring food, like, because there was just like so much food. So it was more like a symbolic plate that we would take to our second spot. Our first spot, it was my grandmother from my mother's side. And even though she would potentially also cook like about 10 different dishes, the number of families under her was so big that we would still need to take, like, a cup of, good-sized dishes to be enough for all the people attending the first celebration. So the first celebration was, in other words, much bigger than the second one, because it was a larger family, right? Like, my grandmother, she had like, 4 kids, but each, or 4 children, and each child would have several children. So there would be, like, literally, I don't know, like a dozen cousins, and sometimes, during Christmas, you also bring in friends. So it was just like, a huge party back then. All right, Matt is asking if I have visited Novo Hamburgo. If so, what are your thoughts about the area? Matt, unfortunately not. I have not been to Novo Hamburgo. I have heard good things about the location, okay, and I think it should be worth a visit for sure, right? Just in line with what I shared over here, like in the past, whenever you are considering, like moving to Brazil on a more permanent basis, I think a pretty good strategy is for you, to visit lots of different places before settling. Okay, that's going to help you avoid additional movings down the line, unless you so desire, right? Like everyone is different. Some people they say, listen, I don't care if I'm gonna need to move again, and if that's the case, maybe you don't need to spend too much time trying out different areas. But yes, Matt, I think Novo Hamburgo, it could be a good idea for you to check out. And I want to say thank you for everyone, showing up today. I know today is a kind of busy day for many of you, so your presence over here is very meaningful to me. Special thank to Matt and Adrian for the Christmas gift. I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words for every one of you who shared here your wishes. Not only for me, for our team, but for everyone participating in the live stream, and wishing you and your families a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year's Eve. We're not going to have a live stream until after the New Year's Eve, so letting you know, I'm going to give you guys a break, all right? You're not going to be meeting me until after the New Year's Eve, so wishing you, really happy celebrations with you and your loved ones. Thank you so much, and you guys have a blessed rest of the year. Take care.